Right now, Governor Andrew Cuomo trying to make like Santa Claus with a series of tax cuts ready to stuff in the stockings of New Yorkers. Can he get them passed? And more importantly, are they really a good idea? Well, our panel already debating. And then Pope Francis, Time Magazine's Person of the Year. But if it's so good to be the Pope, why are so many in our country rejecting the message? Is there a compassion deficit when it comes to America? And later, is New York ready to inhale? A state center proposes making the Empire State the third in the nation to legalize marijuana for recreational use. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to RFL. I am Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us this Wednesday evening, December 11th. And we begin with a man in the Albany spotlight in 2014 and possibly nationally a few years after that. Of course, I'm talking about Governor Andrew Cuomo, and call it an election year gambit or just an economic turbo boost. He is pitching a brand new tax cut plan and has already begun the sales job. Now, for more on what Cuomo is cutting and the reaction in Albany, let's bring in a senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman. We kind of saw this thing coming, but still it's interesting here already, some of the reaction to it.
Well, he sent out for this commission headed by former Governor Pataki, and now that commission has come back and the governor's endorsing those proposals, and the governor's offering a series of those proposals, each want a cut of one form or another. First up, a so-called circuit breaker, a tax cut for anyone whose property tax bill grows larger than a certain portion of that family's income. Then a straight-up property tax rebate. That rebate would be the same as any increases in your local property taxes. So if your bill from the county and school board go up 2%, Albany gives you 2% back. But that only applies to people in places that stay below the state's 2% tax cap and not in New York City where the cap does not apply. Cuomo also pitching a big increase in the estate tax exemption, going from $1 million to those over $5.25 million. And to top it all off, a cut in the corporate tax rate and other tax code changes designed to benefit businesses. Will Cuomo get his election year tax cuts? Well, let's see what two of the other Albany's three men in a room are saying. Senate Republican leader Dean Skelos not happy. He wants tax cuts, but he says the cuts must go further. Democratic Assembly leader Sheldon Silver not happy. He wants programs funded better first, like schools, and he calls the cuts unfair to New York City. More reaction. Farm groups happy thanks to the estate tax help. Liberal groups unhappy. Unions unhappy. Rich?
All right, Andrew, let's bring in our panel to sound off on this. Richard Brodsky, former New York State Assemblyman, senior fellow at Demos and professor at NYU. Dominic Carter, all-around swell guy and political journalist and author. Republican strategist, professional troublemaker, and co-founder of the New York Meeting. Brian Murray and Andrew, who you've met. All right, Richard, we gave the quick snapshots here. How about you? Happy, not happy?
Well, my happiness is not a matter of any great public concern, but
it's
thank
also
you for
happens
asking.
Twice a century. Go ahead. Yeah.
Look, this is part of a plan, progractionary, which I have written about,
coined, yes,
where he's very left on social issues, gay marriage, guns, abortion rights, and on economic issues, he has largely been a giveaway to the rich guy.
Not a shocker. This came back from a committee led by Governor Pataki.
Well, it's not that's it. He had to appoint two commissions to get the answer he really wanted. So, with respect to the property tax thing, that's a broad-based tax break that makes some sense. Business tax stuff is economic nonsense. It's ideology and politics. There is no showing that the tax rates in New York on business are in any way a function of business activity. The places where taxes are the highest, the places where business is you can, but make it sensible trouble. If we're going to change stuff here.
My first comment is, I don't know you've ever voted for a tax cut that I know of. If you have, God bless you.
You don't know very much.
Well,
my record on tax cuts
it wasn't a question, it was a comment.
Fairly well.
Number two, this was Pataki and McCall commission. McCall's involved in this thing too. So there's a bipartisan aspect to this. It's not just a Republican
aspect. Turns out you can be wrong on a bipartisan basis.
But the point is, wait, let's go ahead. Wait, there's another fact. There's another fact. Time out.
But can anyone for a second close your eyes and think of a New York governor who wants to raise the estate tax? I mean, just think about this.
He wants to lower the estate tax. They've already been taxed once. Why tax them again?
We can have an ethical debate about that, but my only point is a Democratic governor doing this. That surprises me.
It's a long time coming. Why do people, when they accumulate wealth in this country, does the government come in upon their death and take half of it?
I hear you. But again, this is Andrew Cuomo proposing this.
Because Andrew Cuomo and our Republican right-wing austerity friends are merging on this issue. What's hard to accept
Andrew
about
Cuomo
that?
almost ran as Republican last time when he ran for election, first time as governor, I felt. A lot of his policies were Republican
Economic policies.
That's correct.
Right.
The other thing, though, when you say that he wants to give back to the rich the whole time, he raised the taxes on the rich last time in Albany when he passed the tax increase.
Shh, tell nobody, because he's forgotten about it.
But you seem to have forgotten about it, too.
Fair
Hey, Dominic, is
Fair
this,
point.
is this about next year or is this about 2016?
Both, but as long as Hillary Clinton is out there, 2016 is not going to happen. I agree with Mr. Brodsky. On socially, Governor Cuomo, he's on the left, but when it comes to economic issues, if you close your eyes, it's almost like he's a Republican. But what I find amazing about this is that whatever he comes forward with, it doesn't matter how many commissions, it's going to go through the legislature because it's going to pass the legislature. It's not going to sit well
Why?
with Brodsky because they're afraid of Cuomo. And they're not going to stand up to him, and he's going to get the votes.
No.
So it's
Shelley's
a
not
done
gonna
deal.
pass this.
You'll see. It's a done deal.
The property tax parts are alive. The other parts, the business tax will be very hard to do, and the estate tax is going nowhere.
A couple things. Number one, Hillary's not running for president. She's going to play kingmaker or queenmaker. Okay? Number two,
Hillary's not running for president.
Don't get him.
I've said, no.
You know,
But
you
also,
had one
New
good
York,
moment, deny your
New
vote.
York, New York ranks 50th according to the Tax Foundation right now in its report they put out in October
Tax
for
Foundation's
taxes.
not a-
For
That's-
taxes,
Tax
they
Foundation's
rank
not a credible
everything
source.
across the country,
linked
and that's the
local
50th
taxes and
state.
state taxes.
They took
New York
property
State
taxes,
is
they took
right
state
in the
taxes, they
middle
took personal income
for state
taxes.
tax.
How
Okay.
does it rank 50th? And
Andrew,
among
but
their
here's-
top 10, three of the top 10.
Somebody that's got a word in Obi.
No,
Go ahead,
because
Andrew.
3 of the top
But here's
10
the
were
thing.
top in job growth.
Here's the thing. New York may have a surplus depending on how you balance the books going forward, and so Cuomo may or may not have the money to do this. But to get there have been substantial cuts to municipalities, to cities. There have been substantial cuts to other services, schools,
And more coming with
hospitals,
sequestration.
that sort of thing. My question is, isn't that money that Cuomo just wants to hand out in a tax rebate better spent funding those programs, or so many cities that are on the edge of bankruptcy themselves? And I know you focused a lot on that, Richard.
Don't call them programs. What you've got are services that are suffering. You've got mass transit services. You've got parks that are in a state of disrepair, roads. There's a bunch of stuff that we need to invest in. If he wants to turn the money for investment into money for tax cuts for the rich, he's going to end up making a grave political mistake. The era of austerity and Republican economics is over.
But if we lower taxes, we get more jobs. We get more jobs. We get more revenue.
That is-
these are
that's-
dollars that belong to
that's a
taxpayers
religious
of
view.
New Yorkers.
There's no evidence of that.
And
Yeah,
the
but
other
where's
thing,
the
I've-
evidence? I've been listening to that for almost 30
But the
years.
other thing-
for 30 years, I've been listening to that argument, and I don't see where the jobs are.
Well, wait,
look at New York, though. New York's jobs are going down because they're going to states
but
that
here's,
have lower
here's
taxes.
the point, though, okay? First of all, they've done studies in terms of job migration and people who've moved across borders here. And we've done this with folks in New Jersey and Connecticut and New York. There's no evidence of it. But a separate point. If your point is it's unfair to tax people that much, okay, we can have that debate. But to suggest here that, hey, if you cut the funds here, you're going to create more jobs. If you're more concerned about jobs, let's build stuff. Let's do what he does. Let's fix the roads. Let's put up a couple different
hasn't come
bridges.
down is because of these idiotic Republican austerity cuts on the discretionary spending has depressed employment. You can't have it both ways.
Well, no, don't forget, the people have left the job hunting world, too, because they can't get a job. They've moved on. So the unemployment rate's actually up. Let's not forget that.
Don't tell that to Rand Paul because he says you're doing people a favor if you cut them off on unemployment.
Well, that's a whole
But I
different-
guess
that's a different
for-
conversation.
The same thing
But
happening with the federal budget right now with the deal that struck. Again, it's distributing money back out and not spending the money, not investing the money in a
There
way
are
that would make
reasons to
sense.
cut taxes,
Yeah.
and you can make that case on a case-by-case basis. It is not that it creates jobs. It doesn't. It's not that it's a good economic policy. It isn't. There are fairness and affordability issues. If you'd only stick to that, we could have a
the
reasonable
property tax
conversation.
fight. No, wait. The property tax thing. Let me just tell you from a taxpayer who paid. It was getting obscene. It's getting ridiculous. And I understand the property tax cut, and I don't think you got to be a right winger to say enough's enough. But some of the stuff where it goes beyond that. Listen, we sat down last week, and he'll tell you better than I. You talk to certain city mayors here. They say the phrase unfunded liability like it's a 4-letter word. And they say the more Albany, that's real easy for them to say, okay, we're going to cut the taxes. But where's the money going to come from? The feds ain't going to pay it. If Albany's not going to make their fair share, what happens to Uticas of the world, the Syracuses of the world? It's going to get ugly, Albany.
unfunded mandates are a terrible burden on any of these
That's
communities.
not what he's talking about.
But
He's
that,
talking
no,
about unfunded liabilities.
but the liabilities are part of it. But the mandates that Albany keeps on passing, which
Oh.
requires them to spend more money, which makes them have greater
What do
liabilities
you
over
got,
the long
talking
term.
points in front of you? Let's try to have a
make fun of
conversation
the
about
next guy.
reality. For crying out loud.
All right.
We didn't talk about Bill de Blasio either, don't forget.
Well,
de Blasio wants to
you're gonna
raise
be able
the
to work
tax.
him into this next conversation, because when we come back on the other side of the break here, the Pope and the New York Times story, what do you say they have in common, that phenomenal series going on right now? It could have to do with a compassion gap in this country. When we come back, we're going to tell you about why some people's reaction to that amazing young girl profiled in the Times, it says a lot about what's going on in Washington as well. Stay with us. We'll be right back.